table in between the chairs.
Quick question, sure.
Yes.
How will
So if you'll see, get down here, get through all this. I'll say something about Shiva. I'll mention the recessional. And I'll skip it. First, the coffin will go out with the pallbearers, and then the rest of the family, and then everybody else. And then I'll do a short prayer afterwards. But I'll kind of say, before we all leave, I'll say this. So I'll help cue you. You don't happen to have a pen on you, do you?
I'll get one. I'll get one for you.
You good?
I think the temperature's okay in here.
Yeah.
And you've worked everything out with them about the casket and
I think so.
pallbearers and all that.
So far, I think we're good. So,
Do you need anything else from me?
I think so.
Okay.
I think I'm good. We're
Right
waiting
over
for a
here
few
on
more
this
people.
side, if you need something, because I'll be in here with you. If you need something, just
Thank you.
motion
Are
to
we
me.
waiting for anybody else? Oh, we go ahead with first. It's all after 10. So.
10:04. I think you're okay.
Good morning. We come together today to mourn the loss of Ilse Nathan, a devoted wife to Walter, Zichrono Livracha, mother to Diane, Zichrono Livracha, and Sharon, sister to Ernst, Zichrono Livracha, and Ruth, grandmother to Miriam, Aaron, Aviva, Daniel, and Rachel, great-grandmother to Naya, Oakley, Ryder, Solomon, Diana, Clementine, Andrew, Edward, and one on the way, God willing, an aunt to Daniel and Stephen, and of course, friend to many of us here today. We come together today to share our grief and sadness at her death and to support her family and each other during this time of darkness. God, we pray to you today that her family may find comfort in those that are present, and that you provide them with the strength to honor Ilse's memory. Blessed are you, Adonai, who comforts those in mourning and enables us to provide comfort. And let us say, Amen. This time I'd like to invite the family to rise as we'll begin with the Kriya. In biblical times, the custom when times of grief was to tear your clothing. While we don't usually tear our clothing now, we do symbolically do it by putting on a ribbon that we tear. In the words of the book of Kohelet and the book of Ecclesiastes, a season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for dancing and a time for wailing, a time for birthing and a time for dying, a time for speaking and a time for silence, a time for seeking and a time for losing. This time of mourning is a complicated time, filled with many emotions and memories, both bitter and sweet. We will begin our service this morning with the recitation of psalms and prayers, thus linking Ilse's life with the 3,000-year-old tradition of the people Israel and the eternity of God. Begin with the words of the prophet Isaiah. Kol me'ekra v'amar ma'ekra, kol basar chatzir v'cho chasto katzitz hasadeh. יבש חציר נבל ציץ, כי רוח אדוני נשבה בו, אכן חציר העם. יבש חציר נבל ציץ, ודבר אלוהינו יקום לעולם. A voice rings out, proclaim. Another asks, what shall I proclaim? All flesh is grass, all its goodness like flowers of the field. Grass withers, flowers fade, when the breath of the Lord blows on them. Indeed, humanity is but grass. Grass withers, flowers fade, but the word of our God is always fulfilled. And in Psalm 18, we read, Im chasid tit chasad, im kvar tamim tit tamam, im navar tit barar, ve'im ikesh tit patal, ki eta am ani toshia, ve'inaim ramot tashpiel, ki eta te'ir neri, Adonai Elohai yagia choshki. כי יבך ערוץ גדוד, ובאלוהי עד גשור. האל תמים דרכו, ימרת אדוני צרופה, מגן הוא לכל החוסים בו. With the loyal you deal loyally, with the blameless blamelessly. With the pure you act purely, and with the perverse you are wily. It is you who deliver the lowly, but the arrogant you humble. It is you who light my lamp. Adonai, my God, lights up my darkness. With you I can rush a barrier. With my God I can scale a wall. The way of God is perfect. The word of Adonai is pure. God is a shield to all who seek refuge. And in Psalm 103 we read, as a father has compassion for his children, Adonai has compassion for those who show reverence. God knows how we are fashioned. God remembers that we are dust. The days of mortals are like grass. We flourish as the flowers of the field. A wind passes over them and they are no more, and no one can recognize where they grew. But Adonai's compassion is everlasting. God's kindness to children's children, to all the reverent ones, endures age after age, unchanging. In the book of Genesis, we read, Vavram zaken ba b'yamim. Abraham was old, advanced in years. On this verse, Rabbi Acha of our tradition teaches that some have the dignity of old age without actually becoming old. Others may age, but never achieve the dignity. But in the case of Abraham and in the case of Ilse, the dignity of age coincided with a long life. Elsewhere in the Torah, we read that the Aron HaKodesh, the ark that held the tablets, was covered with gold on the outside and on the inside. In the Talmud, one of the core texts of our tradition, Rabbah asks, why is it covered on the inside? The outside is obvious, because we want to make it beautiful, we want to decorate it, but why should we cover it on the inside? He answers that the inside should be identical to the outside, toho kavaro. As such is the case with goodness. Its open expression must be matched by an inner conviction. And we'll continue with the words of Psalm 23. Mizmor LeDavid, a psalm of David. Adonai roi lo echsar. Adonai is my shepherd, I shall not want. Binot desha yad bitzeni, giving me repose in green meadows. Al mei menuchot yinahaleni, nafshi yeshovev, leading me beside the still waters to revive my spirit. Yancheni b'magle tzedek laman shemo, guiding me on the right path, for that is God's essence. Gan ki elech b'geitz al mavet, though I walk through a valley of the shadow of death, lo yerara ki ata imadi, I fear no harm, for you are with me. Shivtecha u'mishantecha hema yenachamuni, your staff and your rod comfort me. Ta'aroch lefanai shulchan neged tzorarai, you prepare a banquet for me in the presence of my foes. Tishanta v'shemen roshi kosi ravaya, you anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Ach tov v'chesed yirtafuni kol yamei chayai, surely goodness and kindness shall be my portion all the days of my life. V'shavti b'vet Adonai lo'orech yamim, and I shall dwell in the house of Adonai forever. This time, I'd like to invite Miriam to come up, Ilse's granddaughter, to share a few words about Ilse.
Thank you all for being here today. We thought we might share a few stories about Ilse, or who we knew as Omi. And so myself and the 3 other grandchildren and her nephew Stephen will all just share brief stories about her to show a little bit of who she was in her very long and full life. So I will kick it off with a story about Trafe. Omi loved to take care of other people and make them feel special. And so one of the legendary family stories that have been passed down, which was when we were all on vacation in Maine, I was about 8 years old. And she loved lobster. Wouldn't have it in the house, but we were in Maine. So she took me, she said, we're gonna go get lobster. I said, great, I'm 8 years old, this sounds great. I don't really have a clear idea of what lobster is at this time. Go to the tank. She's like, pick out a lobster. I'm 8, I pick out the biggest lobster. I was like, that's the one, I want this one. And I mean, family legend has grown. It was maybe like 2.5, 3 pounds. but it just has grown maybe to 5 pounds in the telling. It was a very big lobster. She says, you know what? I want my granddaughter to feel special. I'm getting this lobster. She got the lobster. Like, this is, the 80s in Maine. It wasn't that expensive, but it was a very big lobster. I remember I could eat one claw. We got it, we cooked it. I ate one claw. We brought all the rest home. The family says, what on earth is this? Everyone ate lobster salad for 2 days. And to this day, that was started a tradition that at family gatherings that we want to feel special. We want that we always get lobster. So that was something that Omi did just so well, is making occasions, making everyone feel that they were the most important person in the world, even if it involved buying a gigantic lobster. And I don't know if this is connected, but I did become a marine biologist. And we just always think of when these acts of generosity that were just so lovely that they created a whole family tradition that's lasted for, at this point, 30 years and more. And the next person, I'll introduce my brother, Aaron.
Hello, everybody. Thank you all for being here today. To continue on the story of Omi and, quite frankly, food, because she did that so well and she's such a wonderful cook. I think, so when we were little, Omi and her husband, Opie, who we called her Walter, they would come every couple times a year. They first either come to our house in New Hampshire or to Aunt Sharon's house in Massachusetts, but always a combined trip. So what that meant was she'd have 2 suitcases. She'd have a little suitcase for her clothes, well, maybe not so little, because she had a lot of clothes too, but a giant suitcase that was full of food for 2 households, duplicates, one for our house and one for Aunt Sharon's house. And so she would come and we'd be so excited. We'd actually count down the days because we just enjoyed being with them, and she was just very, very warm and generous. So anyway, she opens up her suitcase. First thing she always pulled out was what she called a wurst, or also commonly known as salami, but we called it wurst because that was a German word. It was probably 3 feet long and 4 feet, in diameter. And we just loved it because my mother would never buy that because it was unhealthy, and quite frankly, in New Hampshire, you just can't find that. And so we'd always and we'd eat that. Maybe we think we'd eat over a week. We probably eat it over a day because we loved it so much. And it was just brought such great pleasure to her that we would all kind of come together around this wurst, so to say. And to this day, I would pack my daughter's lunch every day. Sorry, I packed my daughter's lunch, whose name is Clementine. And her name is Clementine, who was Omi and Aunt Ruth's cousin. Just give me. Thanks. Okay, I'm back. Who was Omi and Ruth's cousin, who didn't make it through the Holocaust. And I packed her lunch with the same wurst because it very much reminds me of what Omi gave to us, which is just love and enjoyment of being with other people. Anyways, sorry, thank you.
I'd like to invite her granddaughter, Aviva, to come up next, to share a few words.
Now I have to follow up with that. Okay. Omi was so special to me, and I was always proud to be called her granddaughter. As I became a mom, I looked to her as my role model, and at my mom as well, to guide me on how to raise my children. Omi instilled two special qualities that I realized I wanted to pass down to my kids. That was kindness and resilience. Omi was kind. She was always thinking about her friends and her community. She volunteered at the museum. She knit for cancer patients, and she cared for her friends and families. She was always cooking and baking for others, whether it was her famous brisket, carrot soufflés, her rum balls, her pound cake, and many others. In fact, she was so friendly that we couldn't go anywhere without striking up a conversation with someone new or running into a friend or an acquaintance. It didn't matter if it was a past customer of Penny Palmer or someone from Temple. Omi never forgot a face and a name. In fact, it took me until about age 10 to realize that most of my aunts in Alabama weren't actually family. Omi was resilient. She not only lived through a horrific time in history, but she was able to live a full life and even have 9 grandchildren. Omi was able to take her pain and turn it into something positive. One of my most proud moments was in my 7th grade English class. Omi volunteered to come in and speak about the Holocaust. She stood in front of the chalkboard and recalled these traumatic events and retold her story to my classmates. Omi never hesitated about details, and when one of my fellow students asked, "What would you do if you met a Nazi today?" Omi took a deep breath and said, "You forgive them." And a hush went across the room. It was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. She went on to explain that living a full life is how you win. And that's exactly what she did. And that's exactly what we are going to continue to do. Thank you.
Now I'd like to invite up the granddaughter, Rachel, as well.
Walking into Omi's living room yesterday, a place where I spent many hot Alabama summers throughout my childhood, I spotted her ruby candy dish sitting on the coffee table where it had always been. And it immediately struck me as odd that it wasn't filled to the brim with candy. There was never a time that I could remember or known that it was empty. And Omi was not known, as you've seen, to let her grandchildren go hungry, especially ones with sweet tooth like mine. And that little red dish was always the first place that I would go when we arrived into Alabama to see what goodies that she had placed inside. I'm sure I probably could focus on some kind of sad irony that the dish is empty and the room is empty without Omi. Like the dish, the world truly seems a little less sweet and full without her here. Omi came to this country with very little, yet through her determination, strength, and kindness, she filled our lives and the lives of others with so much joy. She taught us strength, humility, and forgiveness. And most of all, she taught us that life is about the people you fill it with. With that realization, I paused and I turned to my mom and asked, "Can I take home the candy dish?" Omi's legacy will live on through her family, and I can't wait to fill the candy dish up for my own daughter. The candy dish is not really empty. It's just ready for new little hands to discover the sweetness of life that Omi has instilled in all of us.
This time, I'd like to invite Ilse's nephew, Stephen, to come up.
Well, I'm going to take a little different tack and not talk about food. I'm going to talk about the experience that Aunt Ilse and Uncle Walter had here in Birmingham as the proprietors of their business, Penny Palmer, which really was their identity. I have to say, when we moved here in 1959, 60, Uncle Walter was a merchandiser for Loveman's. He was in the basement. And he didn't like that, so he took a shot, rented a small store at the top of the hill of Homewood. It was existing name, Penny Palmer Shop. And the rest is history. The two of them built a partnership that had fantastic results. They were very complimentary of one another. My uncle was a great financial planner, buyer. He always looked nice, but he was not the taste level of Penny Palmer. That was my aunt. She was the picker. She's the one that had the eye. And because of that, they built a very successful business that took the lifestyle of the people of Birmingham they serviced for both social occasions, activewear, and soon the workplace. They were one of the first to recognize the need for career dressing for women. And they serviced their customers with the same hospitality as they welcomed them in their home. The result was a national reputation. I remember when I went on my first buying trip, Uncle Walter enticed me to join them to try it for a summer. He said, "I want you to buy junior swimwear." I said, "It sounds good." I didn't have a lot else to do. It sounded better than law school. It sounded better than being an urban and regional planner, which I couldn't afford that lifestyle. It really, when I found out that was, an annual salary of $2,800, I said, "Oh, I'll try this one." So I went to California, and from then it was kind of history. They became my graduate school. They had a concept. My uncle kept adding to the store. He'd take the store next door, and finally, he saw the need for these the children and the daughters, the next generation wanted to look youthful. So he started with a name, the Swinging Pendulum Shop. This was 1974, and it was quite appropriate at the time. In the meantime, I was in charge of that shop, and he gave me the responsibility, and Aunt Ilse was very supportive because she was the one that was saying, "You're buying too much." And then she would focus on dresses. That was her thing. Uncle Walter, jackets, pants, skirts, coordinate sportswear, which was also very innovative in those days to have coordinated sportswear versus separates. But he saw the opportunity there, as well as outerwear. My mother was foundations, accessories, hosiery, and the three merchandised the store very successfully. and educated their fashion advisors. And there were many of them. You'd walk in that store, see a cast of thousands, but they serviced their customer. They spent a lot of time and attention on making sure the customer had a wonderful experience. And the result was well known. I followed them to New York. I mentioned Los Angeles. All the salesmen would come to town. They'd set up in a hotel. We'd buy there. And it was an education like no one could get. The saying that behind every strong man, every man is a strong woman, is an understatement when it comes to Aunt Ilse and Uncle Walter, because she called the shots. She was tough, she was a shrewd business person, and he listened to her, and rightfully so. She was wise. And I have to say, I attribute a great deal of my personal success to that experience with Aunt Ilse and Uncle Walter. And they were fabulous mentors and also wonderful family to be a part of, no question. And I'm thankful for that experience. Thank you.
Like others who have experienced trauma and tragedy, most Holocaust survivors fall into one of two categories. First category is those who, because of the pain, the suffering, the emotional damage they experienced, never want to discuss it again. They may, on occasion, share a short snippet that pops into their memories, but they avoid the pain of their past experiences by not discussing them. The second category are those who use their past trauma as motivation to make the world around them better. They share their story, they educate others about what happened, and they channel their pain and suffering into kindness and compassion towards others. It is clear for those of us who knew Ilse Scheuer, Nathan, and those who just heard the eulogies that her family shared, that she fell into the latter category. Ilse and her sister Ruth were some of the first Birmingham Holocaust survivors to share their stories, one that is available through the Alabama Holocaust Education Center, where they both volunteered and were active. After their parents and brother and the rest of their family were murdered, Ilse Ruth, as they were each known due to their inseparability during their time at 5 separate concentration camps, were able to make it through the camps, through post-war life, through settling into a new country together, and living as Jews in 1950s Birmingham, thanks to the love, the help, and the support that they had of each other. Should come as no surprise, then, that for most of the last 62 years of their lives together, they lived down the street from each other. These early life experiences not only made Ilse and Ruth inseparable, but it inspired Ilse in other ways. One way was the love and attachment to her family that you heard about already. Her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren were all sources of immense pride for Ilse as they expanded upon the family that she had lost. It is also no accident, as you heard, that when you talk to her family, all of them talk about the closeness and love they each felt. Not only through the endless food, as you've heard already, or the gifts that she would always perfectly pick out for them, but it would also come through her ability to listen and empathize with everyone, which made each person feel the love that she had for them. In a similar way, Ilse channeled that love and empathy into helping others. As you heard about her being a sharp businesswoman, you simply could not leave her and Walter's clothing store buying only the thing that you came in for. She was also a tireless volunteer, giving her time to St. Vincent's Hospital, the Temple Bethel Sisterhood and Gift Shop, knitting and sewing for others, singing in our choir, and more. It was through all these efforts that Ilse extended her family even further. All the friends who felt the same love from her as her blood family did. As we remember Ilse's life this morning, we do so acknowledging that all the love she built, all the good she did, all the lives she affected might not have been. Not only because of her escape through the horrors of the Holocaust and the concentration camps, but because the suffering she experienced during those times were enough that she could have closed herself off to the world. Instead, she used her childhood family's deaths to bring her adult family closer together. She used the hate and pain that was inflicted upon her to put love, caring, and empathy back into the world. I often quote to my religious school students a line from Pirkei Avot, "According to the work is the reward." I usually teach it to them to show them that the more effort, the more energy they put into their studies, the more they will get out of their studies. But as I reflect upon Ilse's life, I'm thinking of this quote slightly differently. The kind of work you put in also affects the reward. If you put in anger and pain, people will feed it back to you. But if, like Ilse, you put in love and kindness, that will be returned to you as well, as you've heard from her family this morning. Even with all the caring she showed throughout her life, this may be the most enduring gift that Ilse left us. Each of us has, in our own ways, suffered loss, tragedy, and trauma. But like Ilse, we face a choice. We can close ourselves off because of that hurt, refuse to talk about it, and suffer it alone. Or, as Ilse did, we can use our pain to motivate us, to make the world better, to educate others, to help others who are suffering, to be loving, kind, and empathetic, so we can make the world a better place. While none of us, other than her sister Ruth, may have suffered the same trauma that they did, we can seek to bring that same lesson into our lives. And so we say, Zichrona Livracha. May Ilse's memory be a blessing for all of us, as we learn from her to channel our own pain to making the world a better, more kinder place. This time I would like to invite her family to rise for the memorial prayer. El male rachamim, shochen bamromi, hametzeh menucha nechona, tachat kanfei hashchina, מעלות קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים. את נשמת גיטל בת יונה ורחל, שהלכה לעולמה, בגן עדן תהא מנוחתה. ענה בעל הרחמים, הסתיריה בסתר כנפיך לעולמי. וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתה, אדוני הוא נחלתה, ותנוח בשלום על משכבה, ונאמר אמן. Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure, to the soul of Ilse Nathan, who has gone to her eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life. May she rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. We'll conclude. Before we conclude, I should say, guests are invited to accompany us to Elmwood Cemetery immediately following the service, which will be wrapping up momentarily for the burial. Shiva will be back here at Temple Bethel immediately following the burial, so if you are attending, you're welcome to come join us at Elmwood and then come right back for the Shiva. In a moment, we're going to recess out. We'll let the coffin and the pallbearers accompany her out first, followed by the remainder of her family, and then everybody else after them. Before we go, say that the mysteries of life and death are beyond human understanding. We are perplexed and overwhelmed when pain and anguish befall those whom we love. In sorrow, confronted by death, which has taken Ilse from our midst, we feel our frailty. Like morning dew, we glisten for an hour or two and disappear into a new day. Roeh Yisrael, shepherd of Israel, guide us, your flock, with love and compassion. If in our grief and desolation we grow distant, do not abandon us, but draw us closer to you. Grant solace and comfort to those who mourn. May they sustain each other with the blessing of memory, the memory of the life of their beloved Ilse. In the valley of the shadow of death, beside the still waters and in the green pastures, you, Adonai, are our shepherd. Be our strength, our shield, our guide, and be our comfort throughout all our days. And let us say, Amen. Now I'd like to invite the pallbearers to come up to accompany the coffin out.